He was like a son to Caesar, loyal, educated, noble. Yet on the Ides of March, Brutus plunged a dagger into the heart of the man who trusted him most. Why did Marcus Junius Brutus betray Julius Caesar? Was it political, personal, or was it something much deeper? This is the untold story of history's most famous betrayal. Marcus Brutus was born into one of Rome's most prestigious families, the Junii. Though his father had been banished and executed when Brutus was young, leaving his mother, Servilia, to fend for herself and her 3 children. She was a controversial figure, having had affairs with powerful men, including Gaius Marius, the most celebrated general of the late Republic. Then there was her relationship with Julius Caesar, which may have produced an illegitimate son, perhaps Brutus himself. Whether or not that was the case, Caesar treated Brutus as his own flesh and blood, forming a close bond with the boy, teaching him philosophy and literature and preparing him for a career in politics. Despite coming from different worlds, Brutus and Caesar shared a lot in common. They were both ambitious idealists with a strong sense of duty and honor. They also both believed in the superiority of the Roman way of life and wanted to ensure its survival for future generations. That's why when Caesar seized power and became dictator, the title he had been offered so many times before, Brutus was outraged. Yes, his mother's lover, now the most powerful man in Rome, had finally taken the crown. And what was worse, the Republican opposition hadn't been able to stop him. Brutus had watched as Caesar had defeated Pompey the Great and other rivals in a brutal civil war, taking hundreds of thousands of lives in the process. Then he'd seen how quickly the Senate, once the heart of Roman democracy, had withered under Caesar's rule. Sure, Caesar had performed great deeds and established Roman dominance over the Mediterranean, but he'd done so by trampling on the very institutions that gave Rome its strength. As far as Brutus was concerned, Caesar had betrayed the Republic. So in 44 BCE, when Caesar was near the peak of his powers, at the height of his glory, that was a major reason why Brutus stabbed him in the back. Cassius was as disgusted by Caesar's arrogance as he was by his methods. Like Cassius, he didn't want Rome to become a kingdom again. He didn't want an empire passed down through a dynasty of Caesars. What kind of legacy would that be? Theirs was a glorious republic. Its citizens were free. Soldiers distinguished themselves in battle. Poets wrote epics, and generals returned home to thunderous applause. Brutus, however, had a secret that set him apart from the rest of the conspirators. While he hated what Caesar was becoming, he loved Caesar himself. He really did think of Caesar as a father figure, a teacher, a mentor. So it was all the more painful for him to realize that Caesar was lost, that the man he knew was gone forever. For example, when Caesar refused to accept the crown that had been offered to him, saying, "I am not ambitious," Brutus believed him. He thought that Caesar was being selfless. Only later did he realize that Caesar wasn't refusing out of humility, but because he didn't need the crown. He already had enough power without it. The only thing Caesar had to do was make sure nobody took it from him. Still, Brutus found it hard to believe that Caesar would resort to murder to achieve his ends. He never imagined that Caesar would have him killed, that Caesar would fear him as a rival. After all, their relationship was unique. They were friends, confidants, father and son. Brutus couldn't imagine Caesar ending that bond by plunging a dagger into his heart. And if anyone had deserved that fate, it was Cassius. Brutus couldn't stand the sight of Cassius. There was something forced about him, something phony. Yet Cassius was the one who brought the whole conspiracy together, who recruited the other senators and turned their hatred of Caesar into action. Among them was Marcus Lepidus, a politician and Caesar's former ally who felt spurned when Caesar didn't reward him with a consulship. There was also Decimus Brutus, a distant relative of Cassius who was eager to advance his career and gain influence by killing Caesar. Another senator was Gaius Trebonius, who had been passed over for a military command. Then there was Casca, a hothead who had been fined for throwing a tantrum in the Senate. Others included men whose names have been lost to history, but who probably harbored their own resentments against Caesar. All told, more than 60 senators joined the conspiracy. But they needed a symbol, someone to lead them, someone to represent the true spirit of Rome. At first, it seemed as if they would choose Cicero. He was the greatest orator alive. Everyone respected his intelligence, his eloquence. Plus, he hated Caesar. Why, then, didn't Cicero join the plot? Because he was afraid. Power had corrupted him, too. He was no longer interested in serving the Republic. He just wanted to get ahead. That's why when the conspirators approached him, Cicero turned them down. He said that he'd rather die than help kill Caesar. And when the assassins struck, he stayed safely out of Rome. That left the conspirators without a leader, without a face. Then Cassius turned to Brutus and asked him to join the conspiracy. At first, Brutus refused. How could he betray Caesar, the man who had taken him in and cared for him like a son? What right did he have to kill Caesar, the greatest Roman alive? But Cassius wouldn't take no for an answer. He visited Brutus in his house late at night. He pounded on the door until it was opened. There stood Cassius, drenched in rain, drenched in sweat. "Don't tell me you won't help save Rome," Cassius pleaded. Brutus stepped back, entranced by Cassius's wild eyes. "Tell me, Cassius," he said, "must I write a letter asking you to join me?" "What are you talking about?" Cassius asked. "Do you want me to ask you?" "No," Brutus said. "You must persuade me." "Very well," Cassius replied. "I persuade you to kill Caesar." And that's when Brutus realized that this was bigger than him, bigger than his feelings for Caesar. This was about doing what was right, about saving Rome. His job was to kill Caesar. Of course, he thought he could talk Caesar out of seizing the crown. Instead, Caesar laughed at Brutus's warnings. He thought Brutus was joking. It wasn't until Calpurnia, Caesar's wife, had a nightmare and the soothsayer warned, "Beware the Ides of March," that Caesar started taking precautions. But it was too late. On March 15th, 44 BCE, as Caesar entered the Senate chamber, Casca struck first, slashing at Caesar with a dagger. The others closed in, their blades flashing. Caesar was wounded, but he fought back. He killed one senator, perhaps two. But then he saw Brutus among the attackers. According to legend, he whispered the words, "T2, Brute," meaning "You too, Brutus?" Then he stopped fighting. That was the signal for Brutus to strike the final blow. He plunged his dagger into Caesar's chest. Now, it's important to note here that according to Plutarch, one of Brutus's biographers, Brutus didn't feel as if he was stabbing a father. As he reached out to kill Caesar, he heard Caesar call out, "Who's there? Who's attacking me?" When he recognized it was Brutus, he said, "Oh, you villain," but continued to call out for his mother, Servilia. With Caesar dead, Brutus thought Rome would rejoice. But the opposite happened. The city fell into chaos. People blamed Brutus and the conspirators. Riots broke out. Caesar's adopted son, Octavian, rallied the people. He denounced the conspirators, called them sons of a whore, then assembled an army and marched on Rome. Civil war engulfed the city. Brutus and his allies fled to Greece. They fought bravely, but they were no match for Octavian and Mark Antony. Eventually, Brutus and Cassius were defeated at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BC. Facing defeat, Cassius took his own life. Brutus surrendered, hoping for mercy, but got none. He, too, took his own life. So in the end, Brutus failed to save the Republic. He failed to prevent Rome from becoming an empire. And he failed to escape the wrath of Caesar's family. But in a strange twist of irony, he succeeded in one respect. He destroyed the very thing Caesar represented, the institution of kingship in Rome. Brutus killed Caesar, but he ended up destroying the idea of monarchy forever. Was Brutus a patriot or a traitor? A defender of liberty or just another pawn in a deadly game of power? History remembers him with both honor and shame. But one thing is certain. In the shadows of power, even loyalty has a breaking point. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to Shadow Time History for more cinematic tales from the past.